Hi everyone, welcome to Conversation with Kushal once again. Today we have with us one couple from ISB and the co-founder of UpGrad as well. And we are going to discuss everything about their journeys about personal finances, money management, where are they staying, what's the typical rental yields that people are getting at these kind of places, and all the questions related to money and personal finance. Thank you so much, Mayank and Aparna, for accepting my invitation. It's an absolute honor to host you guys.
Thank you for having us here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Perfect. So, firstly, thank you so much for inviting me here. It's a beautiful property. If I may ask, is it rented or you've bought this property?
So this one we bought. This is actually our first house that I think the first consumption purpose house. Bought something earlier, but those were all just investment. This is the first one that we have actually bought for ourselves.
Got it. So earlier, you used to buy it for investment.
Yeah,
purpose.
we bought a couple, but those are both for investment. But after some time, we realized that in Bombay, you are just shifting every 3 years, 4 years, 2 years. So we decided that at one point of time, we have to settle down at one place. And I think I mean, maybe she can also talk about it, but I've never stayed in a house that has been bought by myself ever.
Okay.
Because we grew up in a small township. So it was all whatever the company would provide the facilities for my parents. And then after that, I moved on to sort of staying on my own. So this for me is the first house that I'm staying in, which is bought and for consumption purposes.
Got it. That's lovely. And what's the typical rental yield that one can expect if they are buying a property and giving it on rent?
Yeah, look, my take is that this rental yield is quite a complicated number because when people look at rental yields, they look at itna rent aata hai, itna investment hai, and then you come with rental yields. But then you have to keep in mind that there's a maintenance cost, there's a building maintenance, there's a regular repair and sort of this thing. What I noticed is that in this building, it would be roughly about 4.5%, 5%.
Yeah, close to 4%.
4%.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I think yesterday we were doing this math. I think now the rentals have gone up quite aggressively in the last 12 months or 18 months. While the real estate prices have also gone up, but the rentals have gone up disproportionately higher. So what used to be 3.5%, I think I'm now seeing it at about 4.5%.
Wow.
Broadly in terms of what the rental yields are coming in right now.
That's amazing. And what would be a typical rentals at this kind of a place where you're staying right now?
So again, I think the numbers we were just discussing some days back was like 3 is at about the 3 BHK, the 3 bedroom hall kitchen is currently at about 4 to 4.5 in
Lakhs
that range, lakhs a month. Then your the 4 bedroom would be
close to around 5 lakhs a month. I mean, that's
close to 5.
The range in the recent transactions that have happened have gone in that range.
And then as you increase, I think when you get to a bigger one, I think the max that I think this building gets is about 12
lakhs a month.
12 lakhs a
So
month,
that would be like a villa or something.
That would be like a slightly bigger property, a villa or something like that.
Got it. And that would be how many square feet? It'll be
5,000, 5,500.
Got it.
So 5,500, roughly around that, including the decks and everything. So that's the carpet at which it would be roughly about 10 to 12, I guess. Yeah.
Makes sense. Let's talk about your MBA journey. You guys are from ISB Hyderabad. So what was the cost of education for you guys at ISB, and how did ISB help you in your future careers?
Do you want to go first?
So, cost of education being the same batch, it was the same for both of us. In those days, we had a tuition of about 16 lakhs for the entire
This was
course.
which year?
This was in the year 2008, 2009.
Got it.
Now, of course, I think it's gone to 35,
Now it's
40 lakhs.
35.
45.
Yeah.
45, okay.
35
No,
lakh?
now, at least my flatmate is from ISB. He paid 35.
Yeah, उसके बाद तो
which
अभी
was
2
in
साल हो गया
2021.
होगा. 2 साल हो गया तो अभी.
Now it'll be 40.
Yeah,
I
40,
guess.
45 it has
Right.
gone to, and that's.
Right.
I mean, there's a steep increase, and yeah, let her finish the answer, and then I'll come to mine.
So yeah, I mean, both of us funded our education through education loans, and paid off those loans. We graduated in the year 2009, which was right after the Lehman crisis.
Yeah.
Of course, it was a crisis of jobs at that point of time, but yeah, we managed both of us to get placed, and
So we entered ISB 2008. Then we heard something called financial crisis. We had no idea. Then this Bear Stearns collapsed, right? We said, it's okay. I mean, companies live and die over a period of time. And then after some time, we started hearing about Lehman. Then we started hearing about Freddie May, Freddie Mac, etc.
That was just before the placement season.
Just before the
started,
placement season. And then the Satyam scandal hit
Yeah.
at that point in time, which was for the Indian markets also quite a bad thing. And ISB was very close to Satyam ecosystem being in Hyderabad, etc. So that hit us. So I think little did we know that we are entering into a place where we have to look at ROI. I think after that it became a struggle to find a job. I think in our batch it was quite difficult, and I think this batch would be facing something very similar. But when I hear their stories and I just tell them that look, when we entered, this is what happened, and by the time we exited, finance was wiped off. Consulting was absolutely nowhere to be seen, and there was a complete shift from 2007, 8, and then when we graduated 2009. When things change. So I think in terms of ROI, I have a very simple way of looking at education, right? Because we do, we sort of work in the education space and education field. Any long form education has to be seen with the lens of an ROI. The typical ROI is whatever that you're paying for your education, your starting salary, and I'm not talking about incremental, just the starting salary should be in the range of 1x to 2x of that. Sorry, 0.5x to 1x of that. So अगर आपने 100 rupees दिया है तो 50 का entry salary होना चाहिए, 100 का entry salary होगा, तो it's a good sort of sign. So if you look at Harvard, it's $200,000 I'm assuming right now, right?
Yeah,
I mean
yeah.
a business school in the US, and your starting salary is about $100,000, $120,000. So you end up at about 0.5 of your amount that you're paying. So you should be able to recover the money in 2 years time from the salary. ISB when we joined was a very sort of young institute, right? I mean it was old, but it was young at that point of time. So 2009, ISB was still about 7-8 years old. So at that point of time, our entry level sort of the cost was about 16 lakhs or so, and the starting salary was about 15 lakhs, 16 lakhs.
In our batch?
Yeah, or 14.
No, I think in our batch, I mean, of course, considering the crisis, when we graduated, it came down. Of course, the batch prior to us, I think the average salaries were about 18, 19.
चलो ठीक है, let's just
when
take
we
it
got
about
placed.
12 lakh होगा, मतलब 16 lakh पे 12 lakh मिलता है, which is still a good number because you are getting a recovery period of 1.5 years and you are recovering the salary structure. Today, as the institutions start getting a more sort of renowned, your recovery period goes to 2 years. So अभी आज के दिन पे अगर ISB would be at 35-40 lakh is what you're saying, then the starting salary would be 30 lakhs.
Yeah.
So it will take them about a year and a half plus to recover. In our time, you can manage in 1 year's time, but now it goes to 1.5 years or so. So I think anybody looking at education, long form education, should see that their ROI should be just in that sort of 1 to 2 year period. But that's one way of looking at ROI. The other way of looking at ROI is what is the incremental that you get. So if you entered at, let's say, 7 lakh, 8 lakh rupiah. So I think both of us entered at the starting salary of about 7 lakh, 6 lakh, 7 lakh when we joined ISB. But if you look at the incremental salary, the ROI math becomes even worse. Then it expands to about 3 to 4 years over a period of time.
Right. And what about your experience at ISB? What are some things that you remember, and how is ISB helping you in your day-to-day career as well?
I think, I mean, management education is more about, figuring how to do business, network, right? I mean, the content per se, I think like everyone says, right? You can access the content online. Once you join a particular career, any industry, you learn on the job. But it's more about the skills that are needed, the hard work which is needed, building those kinds of attitudes. And that is where ISB really helped us.
So I think there are three things. When have you done your MBA? No. Are you planning to do an MBA?
No, not
ever.
Really. Nope.
No, not even. It's out of the question completely.
Yeah, as of now, yes.
Yeah. So already,
but
look,
if you can convince me, let's see.
No, so look, I'll tell you. So what MBA does, right? So MBA has got sort of these 3 buckets in which you should look at what you can get out of a management education. I mean, I call it a body of skills, a body of knowledge, and body of experiences. You get those skills. I think one of the skills that I definitely picked up was this entire concept of time management, how to prioritize things, how to sort of manage. There are 20 things to be done. You have to be very focused and laser sharp focus that you can't do everything. So there's a bit of skills that you pick up. You pick up the skills of networking. You pick up the skills of how to sort of manage a larger sort of cohort of people who all come from experience background. So therefore it's sort of interesting to figure out how to manage them. A body of experiences because you are working in a cohort which has got people across all backgrounds. I mean, you have somebody from armed forces, you have somebody, we had somebody who had represent India in Olympics, sports persons. We have people who have come from banking, financial services, different kind of backgrounds. So the kind of the learning that you can have from their experiences is quite phenomenal, because you actually not just look at a particular problem statement from your lens, but you see it from other lenses also. And that gives you a very different exposure as you get out in the ecosystem to evaluate things in a very different way. And of course, you get the knowledge. You get the knowledge of whether it's finance, whether it's marketing, whether it's accounting, so on and so forth. So you do get the knowledge. Sometimes people look at MBA just as for knowledge. That look, मेरे को finance नहीं आता है, मेरे को marketing नहीं आता है. I need to just pick up marketing concepts or finance concepts or strategy concepts. But they fail to look up what it brings in the form of skills and bring it in the form of experiences. For me, the skills and experiences matter a lot more than just the knowledge that we gathered from there. And I think even today, so the other part of the question was, what do we still leverage? What do I still leverage? So I graduated, and I graduated with 2 specializations. I did finance and strategy, because everybody said finance and strategy, etc. is very good and you should sort of do something in finance and strategy. The poor part of the finance was non-existent by the time we graduated. But in that era, I mean, the topics of organizational structure, HR, organizational behavior, those topics I used to always take it very lightly. I used to feel that zarat nahi hai, choda abhi, matlab it's easy topic to sort of manage. But I think today, if you ask me, those are the topics that are most needed by me. And I wish I would have paid more attention to those topics when I was studying, versus now today, then we'll have to go back and think in a very different way. But HR and organizational behavior is something that usually people don't pay enough attention to. And when you're learning a larger organization as an entrepreneur, as a CEO, as a founder, etc., those topics become even more interesting than what you learned as hard skills of finance, accounting, etc., etc.
Right. So it's basically a very case-based pedagogy.
Yeah, it's a very case-based pedagogy. Yeah. So when you're doing something and you get to hear about this is what happened in this company, you can relate to a large extent. And therefore, one more point that I'll mention, Kushal, is that even when you're going for an MBA, it's always good to go for an MBA with some experience in hand, because otherwise you would not be able to relate and connect dots. I think management education is not pure sciences. That if you do A and B and then C will happen. It's a heuristic thing wherein you have learned from multiple organizations experiences, and then you're trying to package it in a year's time or 2 years time, saying ये 50 company में बात हो तो ऐसा होता है. And that's what so specifically management education, if you have done something earlier, it is always better to come prepared with that thought.
So how many years of experience you had before getting into ISB?
I had 3.
Similar for me.
Okay. And what was your salary before joining ISB, and what was your salary after joining ISB? What was this ratio?
I got a little lucky at graduation. I joined at a salary of, when I was joining in, I was at 7, 6.5 or 7,
and
something
you graduated
like that.
from IIT Delhi?
Yeah, from IIT Delhi. So when I graduated from IIT Delhi, my starting salary, my first salary was 3.75. That was the first salary that I got. I used to get about 28,000 or 25,000 a month in Bombay.
Which year?
This was 2005 when Bombay got flooded. And I used to be I used to work in Powai and staying in Borivali at that point of time. So that 3.75 before joining ISB went to 6.5.
Okay.
I joined ISB at 6.5. I exited ISB. I got lucky because I got the highest package on the batch. So I exited at about 43, 44 at that point of time.
43 lakhs?
Yeah. So that was the highest salary. At 2009, it was a big number. So I got my ROI. I don't think she can say the same thing for her because...
So when I joined, I think I was at 7.5 and graduated. I think I was at around 12, 13, I think.
Got it.
Yeah, around that. So yeah.
And that would be the average package?
She was at the average package level.
Yeah, that was around the average. I mean, considering, I think...
The crisis which was there.
Less than half the batch
was getting placed.
They weren't even placed, right? I mean, I think maybe 30% of the batch was not placed. Or people decided not to take up certain job offers that came their way. See, a place like ISB, again, where people come with experience, they are also... a lot of them are very particular about what they really want to go in for. So they don't want to just pick any job on campus, right? It has to be something that aligns with what they want to do. So quite a few people decided to look out on their own, post-graduating. And
can I add one more? So when I said I got lucky, I genuinely got lucky. And I mean it because, many times I've said that many things have happened to me because of luck and because of accidents. So when both of us were looking, we knew each other before because we were working together. So we said, okay, 3 saal ka ho gaya, abhi let's look for a management education to just sort of round ourselves better. So we both started preparing for CAT because you have to sort of take CAT and you have to take GMAT for ISB. So after the preparation, she got into ABCIK or something like that. She got into everything except for one. I only got an L call. Finally, I converted an L call. She got into ISB. I was waitlisted in ISB. So I was not supposed to join ISB. So I did not even get a call. And after that thing, I realized that, look, ya to abhi nahi kuch karna, ek saal aur kaam karna. And she was looking at joining ISB. And then because IIM results were slightly delayed, so she could not sort of figure out whether IIMs are giving the calls or not. But once she joined, she got pretty much all the calls. So my ISB was waitlisted. And I was the third last person to join ISB. The last one was a person who is an internal employee. So the last 3 of us were in the same sort of room. So all 3 of us were the last people to get into ISB. And then you have in management school, you have these day 0, day 1, day 2, etc. Right? So I think on day 0, I was pretty certain, and everybody was certain that I will find and crack a job. I did not crack a job. While this was a day 0 job, I was waitlisted for this job also at the Parthenon group. I was waitlisted. I got my first offer the next day, and then Parthenon converted the waitlisted offer to a confirmed offer the next day. And that's how I landed up in where I am right now. So I genuinely mean when I say I was lucky, I was genuinely lucky. It was not something which was, okay, I knew I cracked it, I did this. Almost all the interviews I bombed completely. I did not get a single convert on day 0. And I had perhaps the highest number of shortlist for day 0 interviews. And I was landing up at 0. Yeah, so that's why I say it was luck. And that therefore one should never underestimate the value of luck in whatever that you do. And when it comes, take it with both hands and then make the maximum use of it.
Right. So you got into EY Parthan after ISB, which is where you got the salary of 43 lakhs per annum. And then after that, how was your career trajectory before starting UpGrad? Like how many years?
So when we joined, it was still called Parthenon. I think EY acquisition happened when I left Parthenon, 2014. So from 2009 to 2014, I worked at the Parthenon group. Actually 2013 December, somewhere around that. So 2013 December, I worked at Parthenon group. So I sort of built the business out. We're a very, very, very small outfit. We're about 10 people out there. So that's where, Kushal, I got into Parthenon because I think A, it was consulting, B, it was the highest salary package coming out of campus at that point of time. But I never thought I'm joining Parthenon because of their expertise in education. Because education was one vertical, healthcare was another, consumer was another. So, we were just told that, look, these are a broad mix. So I got into education a lot by the sheer fact that I'm joining Parthenon. And it was not by design that I got into education. So again, it was an accident. I got into education sector, and once I started working in the education space, I just fell in love with it. I enjoyed education a lot. I saw education. I spent a lot of time in, less time in India, but a lot of time in Southeast Asia, Middle East, Brazil, LATAM, China, Korea, Australia, etc. Just to understand how the education ecosystem evolves. After doing that for about 4 to 5 years, I moved on to joining Bertelsmann.
Just before that, can you tell us some insights what you got after going to all these countries about the education system?
No, so I think for me, one of the biggest, I would say 3 broad learnings. One, I was super convinced that education is a very, very large market. I never saw education from that angle, right? Because when you're looking at stock markets, you see L&T, you see sort of levers, you see the ITCs of the world, Reliances of the world. Education never comes anywhere. Education was never spoken about. When I started looking at the market, I realized that education is very, very large sort of market and very large sort of domain. Second, for me, what was the biggest insight coming out by looking at the education sector was that it is very similar to a consumer sector industry. It behaves a lot like consumer. If you think of buying a premium education, it is like buying Louis Vuitton or Gucci, right? The product is the same. You're getting the same MBA degree, but ones give you a slightly more snobbish value than the other, and therefore the club networking, etc. So it's a lot related to consumer industry, and therefore there's a lot of synergies and sort of similarities between the two sort of sectors. And I think the third one for me when looking at the education sector was just the fact that it is one sector where you have scale, it behaves like consumer industry, but there's a lot of impact that the sector delivers. And the impact thing was the most powerful thing of the education sector, that whatever that you're doing, you'll make money, you will not make money, you'll make profits, you will reach a certain revenue scale, etc. But at the same time, there's a large impact that's happening in the ecosystem. I think these were very sort of important for me. And that's why when, right after that, when Bertelsmann was looking at establishing the India office, they were looking for people who understand education really well, and therefore they can build the education investment space. And I think they have done fairly well in the education ecosystem. I spent about a year's time investing in the education sector. So the good thing was I learned a lot by looking at the global markets. I thought I can invest find good companies, but I think at that point in time you could not find too many great companies to invest in. It was challenging. या तो product अच्छा नहीं था, या तो founders were not thinking in a big way, and it was frustrating to me. And therefore that experience taught me that India में market बहुत बड़ा है, India में problems बहुत बड़ी है, India में भी impact करना बहुत, it's actually doable. And that's the time when the thought process of UpGrad started coming in, and the journey of UpGrad started right after Bertelsmann. When the thought came in, and when I realized that there's an opportunity, let's build something of our own itself.
Got it. And what was your last salary when you quit your job and took a plunge into entrepreneurship?
So my last salary would be about 1.5, 1.5 crores.
So tell me one thing, like this is a very common question which I also get a lot. Once we are used to getting our monthly salary credited to our bank account, there's always this fear that okay, abhi ye agle mahine to aane nahi wala hai if we are taking a plunge into entrepreneurship. And since it's a very big amount for like someone like you also, let's say someone who's doing a job at 1.5 CR or even more than that, so the opportunity cost is very high of all the hours that they are going to invest. So how do you tackle this problem of taking a plunge into entrepreneurship, and how do you deal with the fear of failure that you get?
Yeah, no, I think, so when you're coming in, there's always a thought process that, look, boss, if I'm letting go of something which is steady, something which is stable. But I guess that point in time, you have to be a little irrational. Because I think no rationality will teach you this thing that let's take the plunge, because no mathematical model that you will build saying, okay, if I percentage of success is X percentage and you will get Y kind of an outcome, and therefore it's better to take the plunge. I think at that point in time, your conviction on the idea, your conviction on the space, your conviction on the opportunity that you're pursuing is what should drive you in taking that decision. Because if you're looking at a framework, whether it should come in because you think that you can get a 100 crore outcome or 500 crore outcome or 1000 crore outcome, you will never be able to take that plunge because no numbers will make sense in the process. But I guess for me, it was more about the fact that if I don't solve the problem will exist. I will never feel satisfied because I'm always on the other side of the table. So I know the problem and I know it's a big problem, but I'm not doing anything about solving the problem. So it will give me that sense of dissatisfaction or a sense of lack of fulfillment. And the third one for me was that, look, I personally felt, and this is with all humility I'm putting it down, that I felt that I understand education perhaps I really understand education sector, if I put it this way. I think I personally feel that I would be amongst top 0.5%, 0.1% people who understand the education space deeply, and therefore I felt that if I'm not doing it, then what's the point of learning and what's the point of doing a whole lot of things. So I think at that point of time when you're looking at space, you have to play on a circle of competence. You have to believe in the idea deeply, and you need to believe that if you don't do this problem will continue to remain. And I mean, if you are happy with the problem, then you don't need to jump with it. But if you feel pained by the problem, then jump on and do something about it.
Yeah, that's a very valid point. If you love the problem, then you should definitely go for solving it.
And I'm not saying the problem love should be like I'm not bringing a romantic context here. I'm just saying that you have to be passionate about the problem. You cannot be romantic or emotional about the problem.
Makes sense.
Yeah, ये तो बहुत खराब है तो करना ही है मुझे. But अभी you have to be passionate and you have to be sort of realistic about that problem. And then if you combine that thought process, you will see some good results coming out of that ecosystem.
Makes sense. I think I agree. So that's a very valid advice about being passionate about the problem and not just romantically loving it, of course, and not being emotional. That is like very important. So coming to the money management side now, since of course you guys have achieved a lot and you're super successful in your careers as well, how do you manage your money in the sense that how much money goes into which asset class? What are the typical returns you expect, and how is that entire ecosystem for you?
So I think this was See, I think when you're starting something of your own, you don't typically have a lot of corpus built in, right? I mean, it takes some time. When you get lucky, very few entrepreneurs find a chance of liquidating something via secondary route, etc., because you don't typically build a lot of sort of asset class over a period of time, because I think whatever salary, you're maintaining the lifestyle and you're not spending your entire saving in the form of equity in the organization. So once any liquidity event happened, I think our thought process was very simple that, look, part of that should be just to have a house of consumption. So I'm not keeping this as investment that's out, because there's no investment in it. It is just that you're living and you're sort of staying there. I think sometimes people confuse buying a house as for that you're using to stay as a corpus in investment. I think one should never keep that in mind, and it's just out of the corpus of investment. But for us, when you looked at it, I mean, we are young overall. I think we believe we are young. The numbers may say very differently. But we believe that we still can take a little bit more risk. And therefore, for us, roughly about 60 to 65% is in pure Indian equities. Largely, I think 60% would be pure Indian equities. About 15-20% would be in the context of startups and angel investing in that sort of zone, partly as LPs, partly as writing small checks here and there sort of on various companies. I mean, it's not angel investing, but just sort of putting something someplace so that I get to learn. It's better than paying a business school for education. You just sort of put in something, you get some metrics and you learn something about it. And the last sort of 20% odd would be in the form of debt or some kind of bonds and debts out there. I think that's the broad split that we have overall across all the investment sort of numbers right now.
Who's the money manager amongst the two of you?
We don't manage any money ourselves. I think a lot of money management is done by sort of advisors who are supporting us. We keep a very small portion of what we have, let's say about 5 or 10%, just to sort of dabble on a daily basis. So I think that's something that she does more often. But the remaining 90% is with the advisors and advisors' help, etc. Because I think what we have come to a conclusion, I used to have earlier, and we're just checking, we used to have earlier about 60% of the capital that we would be deploying, or 70% of the capital we'll be deploying, which will be deployed by us. So we would decide, okay, ye stock lena hai, ye lena hai, wo lena hai. And I think after some time we realized that we are very bad at it. We just don't, because we are not living and breathing that on a daily basis. And therefore it gets a little complicated.
Let the experts do their job, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in a sense, I think that makes sense.
So once we start, and you do this dabbling thing, it's a little bit more for thrill, right? I mean, every day you put in some money, 5 taka upar gaya, 10 taka upar gaya. You like it, but it's not sustainable. You can't make money out of it. I mean, you cannot sort of generate corpus and wealth. So call it a video game sort of stash kept separately, which I think you do it. You do track the performance of those, but again, they are not. They're not serious investments, so to say.
Makes sense. What is the typical return you guys would expect from all the asset classes you mentioned?
I think one's looking at around a 12 to 13% kind of a return, right? I
mean, that would be in equities, right?
For us, because we have largely equity,
right? I mean, it's largely
so debt will bring it down, but the startups we expect slightly higher. So I think the blended number that we are talking about is about 12% post-tax, roughly in that. That's what we expect. Look, last 2 years have been good for whichever angle that you look at it, but I personally believe that a combined level of 10 to 12% is something that is achievable post-tax. We are not here to sort of look for a very high return, because that's not what our day-to-day job is. Our day-to-day job is to sort of, for me it's education, for her she had been in the banking space. So for us, that's what we know, but we don't know markets really well. And therefore, our numbers would be very subdued than what the regular folks out there would be looking at.
Makes sense. And you mentioned that 15 to 20% of your wealth is also invested into startups. As per you, what exactly is the amount of money that people should have before they even think of investing in startups?
See, the first time I did it, I was a complete nobody. I put in some money. It gave me a 5x return or 6x return. I was very happy.
What is the average ticket size you invest?
So I do about 5 to 15, roughly in that
5 to 15
range.
lakhs.
Yeah, 5 to 15 lakh. I mean, if there's somebody good, then I'll go to 20 lakh, 30 lakh. But in that typical range.
And when did you start this journey?
My first check that I wrote was in 2013-14. But that was long. That was even before UpGrad. After that, I did not write any check because I realized that look, I would rather back myself than anybody else out there.
Which will give you 100x ROI.
Yeah, which will give a much better ROI versus a very sort of small sort of return. So that was the first check that I wrote, and after that I did not do anything.
Okay.
And then post UpGrad, I did start sort of putting in some capital. To your specific question, Kushal, I think you do need a runway. So you can't just do आज सुबह उठ करके कोई आया बोला कि चलो ठीक है 5 लाख है तो इक्विटी से निकाल करके यहाँ पे डाल दिया. I think you need to have some corpus sort of there for you. I advise anybody coming in. I'm not the best person to advise because I don't do aggressive sort of angel investment. But I say अगर 5 लाख का करना है, at least you should have a visibility of 20 companies, 25 companies.
Okay.
If you're doing 25 companies, 1 crore, 1.5 crore type ka corpus if you have. So if you have 1 to 1.5 crore corpus, you can potentially think of looking at it and dabbling in it, and then sort of identify the right entrepreneurs where you can sort of back their vision and give them some inputs in the process, because at the end of the day, this investment is not necessarily for sort of investment purpose, because in her mind it's zero. So she knows that capital is going to be zero. But you learn a lot in the process. You learn a lot, you sort of get a different perspective. You understand what the early stage challenges are, why the companies are scaling up, not scaling up in that zone overall.
How many startups you would have invested in?
I don't know. I mean, maybe so far 10 odd would be direct investment, and there are about 2 funds that I'm invested as an LP.
Got it.
So those funds sort of typically invest.
So guys, just like for the benefit of everyone, so LP is like limited partners, where like Mayank is investing his money with the fund, and the fund generates a return, and out of that a certain percentage goes to the limited partner. Just for the clarity, like for everyone's benefit.
Right. So the LP's one is slightly more passive, but this is just to sort of learn the ecosystem, and one of them that we are supporting is a US based fund. So it just gives us an exposure in the US markets with the Y Combinator ecosystem, because they typically fund the first check out of Y Combinator. So that's an interesting one for us to sort of learn and pick up. And the other one is an India residency very early venture based model. So I think that's the other one that we are sort of looking at participating in. So I think these 2 funds give us India exposure as well as the US exposure.
Got it.
I think another point that I'll mention, Kushal, is that you need to also little bit have capital. Well, we all, 100% are in India. But about a small portion of 5-10% we do allocate for international sort of markets exposure also, because that gives you different exposure in dollar, which hedges the sort of currency risk also in the process.
Makes sense. And in terms of the LPs that you mentioned, is it true that in order to like put in money in a fund, like it's like a minimum ticket size of 1 CR or more than that?
I think AIF looks at about a CR, 1 CR and above. So I think that's the alternate investment fund that sort of they keep a ticket size of 1 CR, but I think it's anywhere between 50 to 1. I think some of them have started at 50. Some of them have started a fractional sort of play, but I think most places I've seen it's about 1 plus.
Got it. So for anyone to like invest in and be a LP, like they should at least have minimum
so
1 CR.
that one, but you don't need to commit 1 CR immediately. You have to commit 1 CR, but you have to deploy one over a period of time.
Drawdown happens over time. So
what is drawdown?
I mean, typically they will call for money at different
2
stages.
to 4 years,
maybe,
I think. 2 साल का होगा, 1.5 साल का होगा.
Entirely deployed at one point initially.
Got it. So it will happen in like 2 years in proportion.
In proportion,
so in like every 6 months or every 1 year.
Yeah.
Got it.
So they will ask for the capital and the call for capital, then you sort of deploy that capital there, and then it gets invested. But it's very passive. It's broadly very, very passive.
Got it. Makes sense. And what would be your current like expenses pattern, and how it has changed over the last 5 to 7 years?
I have zero idea on this one, so I'll let maybe Aparna answer this question.
So well, I think the major expense goes on, travel, kid. We have 1 child, and just maintaining of the house and the regular running expenses of the house. It has changed over the years in the sense that I think the expense on the child has gone up. As they grow, there are a lot more things that they're involved in. So that's where the expense is growing. But otherwise, by and large, it's kind of remained the same across other categories.
Got it. And according to you, like if someone is in a city like Mumbai and they are getting some salary, so what proportion of salary should go into rentals, travels?
So I'm out of this thing, but I had a number. What is your number for rental?
Mine is 20%.
Yeah, I think 20-25% is a fair deal. I think 20-25%.
That's a minimum in a city like Bombay. I think you can't really survive below 20.
So I was thinking of this number earlier.
Rental.
And before this, and we were discussing this thing that 20-25% Bombay will definitely go in rentals. You can't do much unless you get above a certain sort of income level, because then rentals may not sort of necessarily increase at the same proportion. But 20-25% for somebody till let's say about 1 to 2 CR salary range will end up getting into some kind of rental model out here. So I think that too will definitely go. I think travel is a lot more. I don't know, it's a personal choice. I think some people may want to take a lot of international vacation versus.
I think travel is again dependent on what kind of vacation you really want to take. I think you can take a vacation where you're spending, for the same place where you're spending maybe 3-4 lakhs, and you can also spend 10-12 lakhs per person for the same location. It just totally depends on what kind of things you're doing, where you're staying. So that's something which everyone can adjust according to their budget, their requirements. But of course, your living expenses, your regular living expenses and all, those are not things that you can really, in a place like Bombay, do too much about. You can adjust it maybe 10-15% here and there. But other than that, you can't really do much about that.
Got it. Makes sense. And when you said that like the kids expenses are also increasing, I assume like the education would be like one of the most
mostly education
expensive.
And beyond that, I think kids these days are interested in too many things, right? I mean, there's so many activities that they are involved in, be it sports or be it any other recreational activities. Everything, there are classes for, and where you're spending. Of course, these are all discretionary expenses. So again, those are something, if you have the means, you can do it. If you don't have the means, you of course need to cut back on those, right?
Right.
So, but that's where we've seen that increase over the years, where the
kids' expense is an important one, which people typically don't
consider,
keep in mind, because if you have 1 kid, 2 kids, the expenses accordingly sort of disproportionately increase. I mean, if you're living in a good complex around here, then a lot of activities are within the building, but many parents have to send the kids outside for some classes or the other. And I think in today's ecosystem, there's a lot of FOMO built in also, and kids are also very frivolous. They will say, "Arey, aaj mere ko ye seekhna hai, kal mere ko wo seekhna hai." And then at this age, you do want the kid to experience a lot more, because who knows, the kid is very good at something, and because you did not try it out, so you never want to be in the context of minimizing your regrets. You don't want to be in a regretful play that, "Arey yaar, he was such a great singer, but I never actually promoted or asked him or her to sort of sing in the sort of growing up years." So sometimes some of the decisions are slightly more driven by FOMO, and I think kids one is the place where it's the least guilt spend. You never feel guilty about spending for the kid. You may feel guilty about spending on yourself or something around, but for kids you never feel guilty, and that's where it is limitless spend potentially, and therefore you need to sort of rein yourself and say, अब इतना हो गया, बहुत है, उसके ऊपर नहीं करने का जरूरत है.
Typically in a city like Mumbai, what would be the spend on an annual basis for a child? How much would that be?
It can vary, like.
Yeah, but education would be the most expensive.
Education, but then again, it also depends on what kind of school, what board school are you sending? Are you sending to a state board school? Are you sending, to an ICICI school or an international school? Within international schools, it varies, right? I mean,
what are the typical fees of international schools?
So international schools, I think
ICICI also would be about lakh, 2 lakh rupees.
ICICI also
Indian
would go
curriculum,
on
state
to
curriculum, lakh, 2 lakh rupees, roughly around
lakh
that.
and a half, 2 lakhs a year. But international schools would probably start from about 4.5 lakhs per annum, going up to 17-18 lakhs per annum.
17-18 lakhs?
Yes.
For which grade? Like
all grades.
Yeah, I mean,
first, second, third, also.
All
18
grades.
lakhs.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
In Bombay, there are schools that are
So you
charging
have
about
the whole
20-25
range.
lakhs
25 lakhs per annum.
per annum
Okay.
per kid.
Yeah,
And some have got 2 kids going to the same school.
Okay, I didn't know about this. This is something which is new to me. I was under the impression 4-5 lakhs is the max.
No, 4-5 lakhs is a starting for international.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
like a cheap international school.
Okay.
So yeah, you have the whole range. So you
got
need
it.
to figure,
Makes sense.
what is working for you, and what you really want to send
No,
your
no,
kid
Yeah.
to-
education for kids is expensive. I think, and I'm giving this example. I think Bombay, I would say the median would be about 7, 8 or 9
in an
in
international
international school. So it
Yeah.
will,
7, 8, 9
Yeah.
lakhs per annum.
yeah, per annum.
Okay.
ये median होगा. मतलब there will be 20, 25 lakh. There will be 4, 5 lakh. But median will be about 7, 8, etc. But I mean, if you look at the same thing when you go to Dubai, look at international schools. The median will be about 20. If you go to Singapore, the median will be about 25. If you look at international schools,
Like
25 lakh rupees
25 lakh
annum.
rupees per annum.
25,
Okay.
30 lakh rupees an annum. So
Got it.
education for kids in some of these international schools are
My God.
very expensive.
You never thought of building an international school for
I,
kids?
so there's somebody who pinged me yesterday saying that,
Huh.
look, I'm looking at setting up a school in Singapore. Would you be interested in putting in some check?
Huh.
I said, right now, to nahi. But international schools are quite a, it's a lucrative box by box business, and it is highly profitable. And there's a big demand supply gap, and then you get a 9-year or 10-year revenue visibility. Because a kid once locked in will stay with you for 10
Yeah,
years.
exactly.
It's negative working capital. You
Yeah.
get paid upfront and then your expenses come in later. The salaries, the price of the school education will increase maybe 2-3 percentage point higher than inflation because it's linked to white collar jobs. So the salary increase is what the person sort of would end up paying. So you can increase the price about more than inflation. So there's benefit from a business perspective that, and therefore education is a very it's a very lucrative opportunity, specifically international schools. If you can afford to have a good campus, a small facility, you will see mushrooming of international schools coming in.
Wow. I mean, I was under the impression that business school market is quite big in the sense that the TAM there is
school
less, but
markets
the
are
school
insane.
market,
Insane.
I mean, 25 lakhs per annum.
Yeah.
And that's a
For 1 or 2 schools only. I'm just saying.
yeah, but still, I mean,
That's
even if
not
it's a 7, 8, 9, I mean, the TAM goes significantly higher because, as you mentioned, like first, second, third, till
10 साल
10th
के लिए आपको
grade.
बच्चा रहेगा
हाँ,
वहाँ पर.
मतलब वो तो रहेगा ही वहाँ पे.
Yeah.
See, of course, international schools, I mean, you have a whole range, there's, and of late it has kind of become a trend to put your kids in an international school. But again, there are different quality levels also. So, so when I'm talking about, international school, I'm talking about a good quality one. But, if you go to a lot of places, you will see some random international school, which is, you really can't figure what kind of education they would be imparting.
Yeah.
But, I think you would know better how that system works, how they get the accreditation to be even giving out those.
See, international schools have got lesser regulation also broadly. Otherwise, for a state board, you have to have minimum size. CBSE, you need to have a sort of typical size. And all these schools that are at this price point, the facilities may not be as great as what one is used to. So therefore, but people are, look, I mean, I'll tell you a couple of things why this is happening. One is this context that, so when I graduated, yes, getting into the IITs was tough, right? But it wasn't as tough as what it is today. I guess the middle class is growing and the demand for high quality education is growing. Therefore, the competitiveness to get into the best institution is growing. And therefore, a lot of parents feel, who are, let's say, middle class, upper middle class, they believe that, look, now the option for my kid is that I should look at international education because yahan to nahi hoga. And therefore, when they start thinking of international education, they start putting international school in advance. And therefore, that's a psyche that one is playing. International school growth will correlate very strongly with the luxury segment car growth. So 30 lakh, 40 lakh plus car growth or 50 lakh plus car growth will correlate very strongly with the number of seats that international schools are looking at growing. So it's top of the pyramid, but growing very, very fast.
Got it. Makes sense. And according to you, like, what is the mindset of a parent when they are spending, let's say, 7, 8, 9, which is the median? So what is the mindset of the parent of sending a kid to this expensive school? So is it because of the network? Is it because of the content? Is it because of the lavish infrastructure? I mean, I don't know, but what exactly
education
is
is all about outcomes. So everybody looks for things for outcomes. I mean, you run a great education brand. So I think a lot of people come to study with you because of the outcomes that they can get. Even in the context of school education, is the outcome. Outcomes play a very important role. It's not about network. It's not about. I think the two of us are not from Bombay, so we did not grow up in Bombay.
Where did you guys grow up, by the way?
I grew up in Assam, in a small town called Bongaigaon. And she's
I grew up all over. My father was in the army, so every year or 2 years I was moving.
Okay.
Yeah. So for us, usually what happens is when you send your kid to a school, you will have a lot of parents that you know from your previous sort of growing up ages, etc. We don't have that much of sort of connect. So networking is not the biggest reason. Neither is infrastructure, because if I look at infrastructure, then I'll never send any kid to any school in Bombay. So for me, it actually boils down to results and meeting the fellow kids, maybe a year, 2, 3, 5 years senior, and knowing how they are doing in their sort of how they are presentable, how they're talking, how good, how mature they are, and the results of the school for sending kids into admissions into sort of the top schools. So you look at those results, and therefore you decide, okay, this school is rigorous, the teachers are good. So between results, fellow students, and the teaching and the teaching quality is how you sort of decide on which school to go for.
Right. So teaching quality meaning content, which is there.
Content. I think more than the content, it's the teachers.
Right.
When you go and meet the school, you meet the teachers, you meet the academic and the non-academic staff, and you get a sense of what the culture is, how. So I think the school that we chose for our son was largely because the results were good, and there's a very strong level of rigor, even in early years. So we wanted him to go through a rigorous education, and that was our sort of guiding principle, and that's why we pushed in.
Which school, by the way?
He goes to Aditya Birla World Academy, ABWA.
Got it. Cool. I think this is very interesting and super insightful as well. So let's talk about your daily journeys also, by the way. So like, what are you guys doing on a day-to-day basis, and how is a typical day looking like in your lives?
You want to start first?
Yeah.
So well, I'm on a break right now. I quit my job a couple of years back. So
where were you working?
I was with ICICI Bank. I used to be in debt syndication, and during COVID, all the managing online school, managing work, everything was it got to the point where I was like, okay, let me just cut down one thing and focus. And with my child growing, I wanted to be able to spend more time. So yeah, I spend a lot of time with my son, and then I like a little bit of markets in the morning. I do that, learning new things. I started learning the piano recently, so
nice.
Just something or the other new is what I pick up. I do it for a few months.
So are you planning to work somewhere in the near future, or starting up something of
Still
your own?
figuring what I want to do. I mean,
this time budget is going to give something. I heard that the budgets are going to give something very strong for women entrepreneurs.
So he's been pushing me to get into it, but I feel like 2 in the house would be a bit too much. So still figuring what I really want to take up next. So in the meantime, I'm busy just enjoying life, so to speak, which I think never had the time. Always been about education, working, all of that. So
she's hardcore into gym and health. So I think for us, health is a very important part of our daily routine. I think she does. I think she. If she goes to gym, I typically don't go because it puts me to shame. So I just go before her or after her, so that I don't have to compare myself to anything that she's doing. But I think the health.
He does his running, so I mean that's something we can't touch. We can't. Nobody can get close to him in the house in terms of the way he runs.
Oh, is it?
So
okay.
I mean, he's into marathons.
Okay.
He just did the.
Are you like
Mumbai
an
marathon.
athlete, professional athlete?
No. I wish I would. I mean, I think if there's an option that I can take up an alternate career, I mean, a professional athlete would be definitely one of those. Though I think it requires a lot of effort and dedication. So I think, I mean. To your question, so my day-to-day routine, I think it starts with, I think the morning, the first thing is to send my son off to school. So just take him to the bus and bus stand. So I think that's a daily ritual that one does. Post that or pre that, I mean, I either go for the gym and I spend an hour, maybe 3 times a week, 2 to 3 times a week gymming, and about 3 times a week would be run.
What time?
So it's either running is from, I mean, it can start from 4 a.m., 5 a.m., 6 a.m.
Wow.
So it's very early.
So you are like an early riser?
No, not exactly. No, but now I have become an
because of running, he has.
Because of running,
he just wasn't.
Okay.
Because of running. So I think I was just telling her someday that, look, when you go down to run at 4 a.m. And you're just stretching yourself, and then you're waiting for your run to start, and then you see people coming out of their parties. So some people are coming out of their night parties, and I'm just going out for the run. So it's a very different sort of ecosystem. But but if it's a very long run, it's 4 a.m., 5 a.m. But if it's a short run, 6 a.m. is when I start. And the gym is at about 7:30. So if I'm running, then I don't do the gym.
Got it.
Otherwise, I take the gym 7:30 to 8:30, and then in the office by about 9:30, 9 to 10 in that sort of time frame. And then most of the time gets spent in the office till about. I'm back at home at about 9 p.m.
Yeah.
So
it's
roughly
what,
about
11, 12 hours.
11, 12 hours in the office, and then do whatever is pending from home, and then cycle repeats.
So as the co-founder and managing director of a $1 billion startup, so what would be your daily responsibilities, and like how have you scaled it at this level? Like how did this
See,
happen?
right now we have very good leaders across all business verticals. So I think each of the business leaders are themselves sort of responsible for their lines of businesses. So for me, at this point of time, I'm spending a disproportionate time on a new initiative, which I can open up, unlock for the coming sort of 4 or 5 years. So that's where I'm spending time. That's largely in the zone of offline and how to increase offline presence, etc. So that's the domain that I'm spending a lot more time. But overall, organizations are pretty well set with all the leaders owning and accountable for individual lines of businesses. So I think that's something that at UpGrad we have come to a place at. So therefore, they spend time on that, and I'm taking care of one separate sort of growth initiative which can unlock certain things in the long run for the broader organization. So we have come to a place where, while a lot of things are, I think one of the things that you say that as you start scaling up, things get easier. I just want to break that myth that it never gets easier. It always has a different set of challenges, a different set of responsibility, a different set of issues that you have to solve on a day-to-day basis. So I'm enjoying what I'm doing at this point of time, and hoping that whatever that we are working on now should unlock a larger growth for UpGrad in the long run.
Got it. What's the scale of UpGrad right now in terms of employees and revenues?
So the employee one is a bit of a it's a good point, but it also sort of is a question which puts a lot of responsibility back onto I mean, as managing director, as a founder. So we are currently at about 4,400, 4,500 odd employees across UpGrad. While Mumbai is where we are sort of registered headquartered, we have a large presence in Bangalore, Delhi NCR, and Pune. I think these are the three other locations. We do have presence in Hyderabad, in Ahmedabad, and some smaller towns, etc. But these 4 would be larger sort of facilities and infrastructure, and so that number has grown quite rapidly. A lot of them via organic route, a lot via sort of inorganic and M&A that we have done. I think we are working for the coming year to sort of achieve a broad sort of revenue of about close to $500 million in the coming sort of financial year. So that's
which is 4,000 crores.
Yeah, close to 4,000, 3,500, 4,000 crores is where we sort of we are aiming to achieve in the coming financial year. But I think the focus is going to be consolidate these businesses and sort of build it in a sort of more sustainable way. So for us, the 3 priorities at this point of time is go deep in the B2C space. A lot in India and a bit in international. I think we believe offline can play a very important role. We believe there are a lot of opportunities that we are not sort of present in, and we need to go deeper. B2B and enterprise consolidation is critical for us, because education and skilling, a lot of enterprise come and ask us for sort of their skilling solution. And then whatever that we are building, it has to be a good, healthy mix of growth and profitability. And how do you sort of balance growth and profitability overall is where sort of the organization has headed towards in the coming years.
Right. If you were to explain the business model of UpGrad to a 13-year-old in 1 minute, how would you do that?
Yeah, so it's not that complicated. Essentially, any individual who's looking at upskilling or moving up in their career, they come to us, they give us a certain amount of money, and we use that money to provide them with good quality education, university credentials, and outcomes. And that's how sort of our business model is, that people come and pay us directly, and we provide them the quality of education, and the cost is what the cost structure is, and the revenue is what the individual pays us directly from his or her own pocket.
And what are your views on the entire Edtech bubble which is going on, the funding winter and the CAGs going off the roof?
So I think education, because of 1 or 2 large players, has got sort of, it has come up a little bit in the not so good light. But my personal take is education is much bigger than what 1 or 2 players can achieve and can sort of put a dent on. Will it have an impact because of 1 or 2 players on the ecosystem? For a short term, yes. In the long run, is online going to stay? 100%. Is
Okay.
education a large play? 100%. So I think I'm very bullish on the sector and very bullish on the ecosystem that this will continue to grow. And I personally believe that education and constant lifelong learning and skilling and upskilling is here to stay. We grew up in an era where education used to be one and done. 25 तक पढ़ाई कर लिया उसके बाद नहीं करना है. But today you will keep on coming back to getting educated on an ongoing basis, and therefore this will become a very macro theme and nothing can stop it. It has to happen, it will happen. So I think I'm very bullish on the sector, and the sector will grow. These challenges for because of one or two sort of bad cases is not a long-term problem in the sector, I think. But yes, CAC is a problem, and people have to find solutions to solving for CAC. And the CAC is a problem largely because I have seen businesses and business model where CAC is 4%, 5%. I have seen business model where CAC goes up to 40%, 50%. The reason, and then therefore a smart entrepreneur has to find ways in which they can bridge the gap to get to that 4%, 5%, because there are multiple ways in which you can acquire a customer in India. Digital is not the only way. And that's what some entrepreneur ecosystem has to learn, that they have to look at other options to acquire customers. You just can't rely on two large companies based out of Silicon Valley where you can just put in money and it's a black box. And therefore you have to open up other avenues. Like what you do in this case is a very strong playbook for any entrepreneur to follow. If you can create a lot of these strong podcasts, it can lead you to building a business. But sometimes people don't think that way. They believe that it's the easy thing to do, put in money in a black box. The black box will give you something and you should be happy with that. That mindset should go away from the minds of entrepreneurs.
Yeah. Although I've not achieved anything in life yet, but I'm a big fan of distribution first business models where you build a distribution first and then you sell a product through that distribution. So that's my mindset, and that is also one of the reasons why content is something which I'm passionate about.
So in education, I'll tell you one thing, Kushal, that in education, if you do not have a good product, you cannot scale up. But if you do not have a good distribution, you will 100% not scale up. So without a good distribution, no good product, no matter how good it is, it will never scale up. And therefore distribution is super critical. And it is more critical in Indian context because product differentiation in a low penetration product does not matter much. If you go to a sort of kirana store today, you see one or two type of Bisleri bottles or the mineral water bottle. Go to the US and there are 25 varieties of mineral water bottles, right? In education, because the penetration is not that is very low, the differentiation amongst products are very limited. You don't know whether this product is good or this product is good. But jo dikhta hai, wo bikhta hai. And therefore you have to be there in distribution. And if you are distribution first, and if you can at least build a strong distribution, your ability to scale up will be very high. But your scaling up will cap out if you do not have a good product. And therefore the product is very, very important, but product will not win the game. Distribution is very, very critical in the country like India, because without that you will never be able to scale up things.
Yeah, makes sense. You also work closely with Mr. Ronnie Screwvala. What are like some of the things you've learned from him?
No, a lot. I mean, I think we started UpGrad in 2015. So I think for the last 9 years, I've picked up a lot working with him. I think one big thing is his ability to get things done, his sheer sort of push of making things happen. And I think sometimes the difference between my style of working and his style of working is that I will evaluate and think a lot with pros and cons. He will just do the thing. And then he knows that most of the times, yes, there will be mistakes, but he will end up having more right calls, the proportion of right calls. So he will take a lot more decision. The throughput of decision making is very, very high. I think he's extremely smart about prioritizing things and figuring out what to focus on and what not to focus on. I think those are things which are very, very important for me to learn also. And one of the things that you will notice with him is that he is always super responsive. No matter whether you email him at midnight or middle of the day or sort of end of the day, he will always respond within 5 minutes to 10 minutes. I think he's always very responsive, and that he does it as a rigor because he's just sort of constantly taking calls and moving out those conversations, while a lot of us will think, let me think a little while to respond to this particular email. I think he does it in a very, very sort of fast and rigorous manner. And then therefore the long-term thought process, there's a lot to learn from him because he thinks of scale in a very different way, which is for me is very difficult to sort of imagine and think. But having him as a co-founder definitely helps in thinking of scale in a very different way altogether, which has allowed UpGrad to be where it is right now also.
Yeah, No, that's very, very sweet of you as well. And it's very inspiring to see success stories like UpGrad who are like doing so good work in the education system. And just lastly, like about your fundraise and also how much capital you have raised at UpGrad so far?
So we have raised, actually, if I'm not mistaken, about 250 odd million, 260 million. So
this
we have
will be
not gone
around
out.
2,000 crores.
Yeah, we have not
Got
gone all out and sort of raising a very large
Got
sum of money, because a lot of our competitors, a lot of our people who in the similar field have raised a lot more money,
Right.
from a $500 million to $4-5 billion of raise. But we haven't gone out and raised a lot of capital,
Right.
external capital, because earlier for the first 5-6 years we never raised any external capital. But I think today, from a business perspective, will be self-sustaining. We may need some growth capital in the long run, but those will be largely meant for growth capital. But
Got
our
it.
focus right now is heads down, build the business and make it as sustainable as
So
possible.
any advice for all the aspiring founders who are looking to raise capital, what they should keep in mind?
And in today's ecosystem, I think while people talk about funding winter, it is very important that you provide a very clear view on how the business model works and what is the long-term way in which the business model will sort of generate surplus and capital. I think today people are not looking at just unit economics, but they're looking not path to profitability, but they're looking at very clear approach of positive cash flow and free cash flow. I think free cash flow has become very critical in the minds of a lot of these, a lot of investors coming in. For people, and I'm assuming that you're talking about very early stage founders.
Yeah.
So I think at a very, very early stage, while a lot of these things matter, but what people typically look for, and I spoke about this some days back, is how good is the team? And people should focus on building a great team. How large a market that you are chasing. You cannot chase a small market and expect a very big outcome. And at what time you are entering the market. You cannot just enter any market. I mean, while you can say today is a good time to enter education, maybe not. Maybe it is, but sometimes timing matters, because if you are dependent on somebody else's funding, they will look at the ecosystem and then take a call. And if the ecosystem says education is not good right now, the calls will be different versus talking about fintech 2 years back or education 2 years back, the calls were very different. So timing is equally important, but it is more important to have the right team and the right market that you're chasing.
Makes sense. Perfect. One last question from my side to the two of you. Aparna, maybe we'll begin with you. So last piece of financial advice which you'd like to give to all our viewers who are watching this.
Well, personally, debt is something which I don't like.
Okay.
So I've always been quite risk averse in that manner. At least
Debt
for
as in, like,
consumption.
investing
debt
in
for
debt or
consumption.
taking
Debt
in
for
debt?
consumption.
Okay.
Like
Taking in debt.
like, I would like, of course, the newer generation, of course, I mean, you read a lot, credit card spending, credit card spends for travel. That is something which, I feel is not sustainable. We've never been into that. It was always, have your savings and then from that, take the right amount, dip into the right amount and then use it. So that is one thing which I feel can be taken as an advice.
Got it. Lovely.
See, my take would be, so both of us, our parents are both have worked in government services. I mean, for her being in the army, my dad was in the oil refinery. So between pension and government, they are well taken care of. I think today's generation is not in that ecosystem, and therefore her point is very valid that one has to think about, when you're looking at long-term sort of planning, you have to think about how much corpus do you need, not just for your lifestyle, but for your healthcare needs, how things will change. The amount that you will continue to sort of outflow will continue to increase because the needs and the approach changes. So you need to have very proper long-term thinking about how you're thinking of financial planning. It's not just today kitna save karna hai, but how much you need to do for a better sort of quality of living in the long run. Because we are not in the ecosystem where, I think in today's ecosystem, majority of the people will depend upon their own corpus rather than the pension that the government would be giving. So therefore the mindset has to be very different, and one should not just live for today but think of the long term. But in a very sort of shameless plug, what I will say is that when you're thinking of investment, think of investment one way, but think of investing in yourself also in a very differentiated way. And I'm saying it very not just from an UpGrad perspective, but also from a context that you have to invest in yourself, because sometimes we always keep on investing money at some place. But if you do not invest in yourself, because you as an individual is the biggest driver of wealth creation. What you're doing is putting in money is just a way of wealth management. But if you can generate more outcome for yourself, it will only happen if you invest in yourself. If you invest in yourself, I think outcomes will be very differentiated altogether.
And investing in yourself can also be in the matter of health, right? I mean, that is something which, as your lifespans go up, it is something that, you need to be fit yourself, you need to age well, because, accordingly your outflows will also increase if you're not keeping the right health, but you have a long lifespan. So that also investment is something that one needs to do, it is.
But in her entire thing, she said kid, house and travel, nothing for herself. One has to invest in oneself. I think that line item has to come.
Right.
How much you're investing in yourself for your own good, for your own health, for your own sort of learning, for your own growth. If you do a lot more of that, I think outcome in the long run is going to be very different altogether.
Right. It was lovely talking to the two of you. Brilliant piece of insights, brilliant piece of advice as well. Thank you so much for doing this, and I'm sure that everyone is going to love it, and a lot of insights were there. I hope I could do justice to your time. I really enjoyed a lot, and thanks a lot once again for doing this.
Thank you for having us on your podcast.